The invitation. There is something worse than death, a fate that would make your soul envy non-existence. And I invited that thing into my home. My name is Miguel. I am 23 years old now, and this is the story of what happened to me, to my mother, to our entire neighborhood in the outskirts of Guadalajara. This is a story about souls that cannot rest, about secrets buried beneath the earth, and about something far more ancient than death itself. If you're reading this at night, I suggest you stop. Turn on every light in your room. Check that your door is locked. And whatever you do, never invite anyone inside after the sun goes down. Everything began 3 years ago when my life had already hit rock bottom. I married Elena when I was 18. We had known each other since middle school, a passionate but turbulent relationship that burned hot and cold in equal measure. When she told me she was pregnant, we decided to get married. My mother, Doña Carmen, was furious. She said I was throwing my future away, that I was too young, that I did not understand what I was doing. But eventually she accepted it. She told me she would continue to support my education, but nothing more. My new family would be my responsibility. Elena's parents were kinder. They let us live in a small house behind their property, a modest place with cracked walls and a leaking roof, but it was ours. They helped us with money when our part-time jobs were not enough. We painted the nursery pale blue. We bought a crib from the second-hand market. We dreamed of the life we would build together. My son never saw the sun. Elena lost the baby at 7 months. The doctors called it a rare medical complication. They said no one was to blame. But Elena did not believe them. She blamed me. She blamed herself. She blamed God. The 2 years that followed were a living hell. She changed completely. The woman I loved disappeared, replaced by someone I did not recognize. There were nights when she would sit in the corner of the empty nursery, and cry until dawn. There were days when she would look at me with pure hatred in her eyes, as if I had killed our child with my own hands. Her parents began to blame me, too. They said I had not taken care of her properly, had not taken her to enough doctor's appointments, had not done enough to prevent the tragedy. In the end, they threw me out. The divorce papers were already signed. They told me to leave and never come back, that it was the only way their daughter could start over. And so, with a small suitcase and a broken heart, I returned to my mother's house. Dona Carmen did not say much when I walked through the door. She simply held me, and I cried like a child in her arms. Her house sat on the corner of a quiet street in an old neighborhood. The houses here were small, built decades ago, their walls thick with memories and secrets. Next to our property was an empty lot where the owner had planted a few trees and then abandoned it. The children in the neighborhood used the narrow path behind our house as a shortcut, running through the gap between properties to reach the other side of the block. And in our backyard, rusting slowly under the sun and rain, was my father's old Ford. He died 15 years ago. A heart attack took him while he was still restoring that car, sanding down the rust, replacing parts piece by piece. My mother could not bring herself to sell it. She said that one day I would finish what he started. But the car just sat there, rotten, decaying, its paint peeling away like dead skin. Sometimes when I looked at it in the fading light of dusk, it seemed less like a vehicle and more like a tomb on wheels. I did not know then how important that car would become. The first months after my return were a blur of darkness. Depression consumed me whole. There were nights when I could not bear to be alone, when the silence of my room pressed down on me like a weight I could not lift. I developed a habit from childhood, one I thought I had outgrown. When the panic became too much, when the walls seemed to close in, I would crawl into my closet and sit in the darkest corner, hugging my knees to my chest. The cramped space made me feel hidden, safe, protected from a world that had taken everything from me. My mother worried, but she was patient. She began taking me with her when she visited her elderly friends in the neighborhood, women who had known our family for generations. I helped them with their gardens, fixed broken faucets, carried groceries. Slowly I found a small measure of peace in their simple kindness. Among them was Doña Lucía. She was the happiest person I had ever met. A short woman in her 70s with silver hair and a smile that could light up any room. She lived alone in a wooden house at the end of the alley, a house that always smelled of fresh bread and flowers. Every time I visited, she would pinch my cheek and tell me I needed to eat more. She had homemade cookies waiting on the table, stories ready to share, laughter that echoed through her small kitchen. When Doña Lucía died of old age, I did not expect it to change my life. I certainly did not expect it to end it. In Mexico, when someone dies, the family and neighbors gather to pray for 9 consecutive nights. They call it the Novenario. They recite the rosary bead by prayer, asking God to guide the departed soul to heaven. It is a sacred ritual, a way to honor the dead and comfort the living. Most people believe that after 9 nights the soul finds peace. But sometimes the prayers do not reach where they are meant to go. Sometimes they wake something that should have stayed asleep. The first night of the Novenario, I accompanied my mother to Doña Lucia's house. The small living room was packed with women from the neighborhood, their voices rising and falling in the rhythm of the rosary. Candles flickered on every surface, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. The air was thick with the scent of melted wax, wilted flowers, and something else beneath it all, something old and stale that I could not identify. I did not pray. I never had much faith even before everything happened. Instead, I went to the kitchen to pour myself a cup of coffee, my 5th of the day. The bitter liquid was lukewarm by the time it reached my lips. I stood by the window listening to the prayers from the other room, watching the wind shake the branches of the old oak tree in the backyard. That night there was no moon. The darkness outside was absolute, a black curtain drawn across the world. And then I saw her. From the back of the property, a figure emerged. A woman. She was enormous, nearly 2 meters tall, her body thick and heavy. She must have weighed over 140 kilograms. I had never seen anyone with a build like that. She wore a dirty nightgown that hung to her knees, sleeveless, the fabric stained with dark splotches that looked like dried oil. Her skin, what I could see of it in the darkness, seemed covered in black marks, as if someone had smeared engine grease across her flesh. She walked slowly, her steps unsteady, swaying from side to side like someone who had just woken from a very long sleep. Her movements were wrong somehow, not drunk, not injured, just wrong, as if her body did not quite remember how to move. Then, without looking back, she walked out of the yard and disappeared into the night. I ran to the living room, my heart pounding. The prayers stopped as I burst through the doorway, words tumbling out of my mouth faster than I could control them. I told them what I had seen. The giant woman, the stained nightgown, the way she had walked out of the backyard as if she owned it. They looked at me with concern. Not the kind of concern that says they believed me. The kind that says they thought something was wrong with my head. 2 men, who had been waiting outside, husbands of some of the praying women, said they had been standing by the gate all evening. No one had come in or out. It was impossible for anyone to walk through the yard without them noticing. My mother exchanged a glance with Doña Teresa, our neighbor from across the street. They both came to me with gentle hands and soft voices. Perhaps I was tired, they said. Perhaps the stress and the grief had finally caught up with me. Perhaps it was just a trick of the light, a shadow that my exhausted mind had shaped into something human. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that my own brain had betrayed me, that the depression and the medication and the sleepless nights had created a phantom from nothing. That explanation made sense. It was logical. It was safe. But deep in my chest, in that place where instinct lives, I knew what I had seen was real. The woman was flesh and blood, solid and present, as real as the coffee cup trembling in my hand. And I knew with a certainty I could not explain that she would return. We walked home in silence. The streets were empty, the houses dark. Doña Teresa accompanied us part way, then turned toward her own home, 4 houses down and across the street. My mother went straight to her bedroom. I sat alone in the living room, trying to calm the storm inside my skull. At 11 o'clock, the phone rang. I heard my mother answer from her room. Her voice was suddenly sharp, alarmed. Seconds later, she called for me. I found her standing by the window, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her face was pale in the dim light. "Doña Teresa says there is someone in the passageway behind our house," she whispered. "Someone trying to get in." My blood turned to ice. I went to the window and looked out at our backyard at the wooden fence that separated our property from the empty lot. And there, rising above the fence, was a face, fat and bloated, framed by tangled gray hair that hung in filthy clumps. And the eyes were wrong. They were white, completely white, with no iris, no pupil, just two pale orbs staring into the darkness, staring at our house, staring at me. She was tall enough that her face cleared the top of our fence. The fence was higher than my head, but she looked over it as easily as I might look over a table. "Yes," my mother said into the phone, her voice cracking. "I see her. That is the woman my son described." Doña Teresa had spotted the figure while seeing her husband off for his night shift. Her German Shepherd, a calm and gentle dog I had known for years, had started barking, wildly snarling with a ferocity I had never heard before. She had called us immediately. My mother told her to go inside, to lock her doors, to keep the dog with her. She was reaching for her own phone to call the police when something changed. The woman outside turned her head sharply, looking toward Doña Teresa's house. Then she began to walk slow and heavy toward the sound of the barking dog. "Get inside," my mother shouted into the phone. "Lock everything. Do not let that dog out." We ran, through our house, out the front door, across the street to Doña Teresa's home. By the time we arrived, the woman was gone. The dog had stopped barking. In the distance from the far end of the alley, we could hear other dogs howling their cries, fading into the night. She was gone. But she had been there. We had all seen her. This was not a hallucination, not a trick of light. She was real. We stayed with Doña Teresa until her husband came home from work at dawn. None of us slept. We sat in her living room with all the lights on the dog lying at our feet, his ears flat against his head, whimpering softly. In those long hours before sunrise, I kept asking myself the same questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why had she been at Doña Lucia's house? And why, of all the windows she could have looked through, had she stared directly at mine? But there was something I did not understand yet. Something that would take many more nights of terror before I finally realized the truth. That woman had not come to Doña Lucia's house. She had come for me. And when I left that night, she followed me home. I lay in my bed as the first gray light of morning crept through the curtains. My eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, but I was not seeing the cracked plaster above me. I was seeing her face, those white eyes, that massive body emerging from the shadows. My mother had always taught me that faith could protect us from evil. She prayed every morning and every night, her rosary beads worn smooth from years of devotion. But what good were prayers against something that walked in flesh, that breathed the same air we did, that could look over a fence and peer into our homes? Something had awakened in Doña Lucia's house, something that should have stayed buried. And now it knew where I lived. Outside my window, the rusted Ford sat in the backyard, its windows dark, its doors closed. It had been there for 15 years, slowly decaying, waiting for someone to finish what my father started. In the pale morning light, it looked almost peaceful, but I could not shake the feeling that it was watching me. The second night of the Novenario, no one spoke about what had happened. My mother and Doña Teresa walked together to Doña Lucia's house, talking about the weather, about the price of tomatoes at the market, about a telenovela they both watched. They spoke about anything and everything except the woman we had seen. It was as if they had made a silent agreement to pretend the previous night had been nothing more than a shared nightmare, something that would fade away if they simply refused to acknowledge it. I walked behind them, watching the shadows lengthen as the sun began to set. The streets of our neighborhood looked different now. The same cracked sidewalks, the same faded paint on the houses, the same stray dogs wandering between garbage cans. But everything felt wrong, like a photograph that had been slightly tilted. The familiar had become sinister. Rain began to fall as we reached Doña Lucia's house. Not a heavy rain, just a fine mist that clung to our clothes and hair. But the wind was strong, howling through the gaps in the old wooden structure, making the walls creak and groan like an animal in pain. The sound crawled under my skin and stayed there. Inside, the living room was already filled with women clutching their rosary beads. The candles had been lit, their flames dancing wildly whenever the wind found its way through the cracks. The air smelled of melting wax of the white lilies arranged around Doña Lucia's photograph, and beneath it all that same stale odor I had noticed the night before. Stronger now, like something rotting behind the walls. I retreated to the kitchen as I had done before. The prayers began a rhythmic chant that rose and fell like waves against a shore. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. I did not look toward the backyard. I did not want to see what might be standing there. Halfway through the rosary, my mother and Doña Teresa emerged from the living room. Doña Teresa was trembling, her face pale and slick with sweat. My mother held her by the arm, guiding her toward the door. She had a panic attack, my mother explained quietly. She needs to go home. Take her there and then wait for me at our house. If anything happens, she will call you. I did not want to leave my mother alone. I did not want to be alone myself. But the look in her eyes told me this was not a request. The walk to Doña Teresa's house was slow. The rain had grown heavier, soaking through our clothes. She leaned on my arm, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. When we finally reached her door, she turned to me with eyes that held something I had not seen in them before. Fear. Deep, primal fear. That woman, she whispered. The one from last night. She did not leave after she walked away from my house. I felt the cold spread through my chest. What do you mean she circled my house all night? I heard her footsteps, heavy and slow, going around and around. My dog would not stop whimpering. He lay beside me on the bed, shaking like a puppy. I held the phone in my hand until morning, ready to call you, ready to call anyone. But I was afraid that if I made a sound, she would know I was awake. She would know I was listening. Doña Teresa gripped my arm with surprising strength. You said you saw her come out of Doña Lucia's house. You think she lives there? You think we woke her up with all our praying? I did not know what to say. I told her we should call the police if we saw her again, that she was probably just a mentally ill woman wandering the streets. The words sounded hollow even as I spoke them. Doña Teresa smiled sadly and patted my cheek the way my grandmother used to do when I was a child trying to be brave. We already called the police, mijo, she said softly. They found nothing. No footprints. No signs that anyone had been there at all. I left her at her door and walked home through the rain. The streets were empty now, everyone hiding from the storm. Water ran in rivers along the gutters, carrying leaves and trash toward the drains. By the time I reached my mother's house, I was soaked to the bone and shivering. I hated being alone. Ever since my son died, solitude had become unbearable. It triggered something inside me, a panic that started in my stomach and spread outward until my whole body felt like it was vibrating with fear. I would imagine the worst things: death, emptiness, the void that waits at the end of everything, the feeling of never tasting food again, never hearing music, never feeling the wind on my face. I went to my room and opened my closet. The darkness inside was familiar, comforting in its smallness. I crawled into the corner, pulled my knees to my chest, and sat there with my eyes closed. The sound of the rain on the roof was like static white noise that drowned out my thoughts. At some point I fell asleep. In the dream I heard a baby crying. The sound was faint at first, distant, like it was coming from another room. But it grew louder, more insistent, until it filled my entire skull. I knew that cry. I had heard it in 100 nightmares before. It was my son, the child I never held, the boy whose face I never saw. I was standing in my backyard. The rain had stopped, but the sky was black starless, an endless void pressing down on the earth. The only light came from somewhere behind me, a pale glow that cast long shadows across the wet grass, and from between the trees at the back of the property she emerged. The giant woman. Her nightgown was soaked and clinging to her massive body. Her gray hair hung in wet ropes around her bloated face, and in her arms, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, was a baby. My baby. I wanted to run to her to tear my son from her grip, but my legs would not move. They were rooted to the ground, heavy as stone. I could only stand there watching her approach with those slow, unsteady steps. There is something worse than death. Her voice did not come from her mouth. It came from inside my head, echoing in the spaces between my thoughts. A fate that would make your soul envy non-existence. Let me in, and I will tell you about it. No. The word tore itself from my throat. No, no, no. But I could not wake up. The dream held me like a fist, refusing to let go. Do you know where your son is? She was closer now, close enough that I could see the black stains on her skin, the way they pulsed and writhed like living things. In heaven, you do not even know what heaven is. He is here, with me. I will give him to you if you let me in. The baby in her arms began to cry louder. The sound pierced my heart like a knife. Let me in, and I will give you your child. I'm going to come inside anyway, but if you invite me, I will not hurt you. I will give you what you want. Just say the words. Let me in. She was standing right in front of me now. Her breath was hot on my face, and it smelled like blood, like rotting meat, like the inside of a grave. Let me in. Fine, I heard myself say. The word came out as a sob. Fine, come in. The moment I said it, she smiled. Her mouth stretched wide, impossibly wide, until it seemed to split her face in half. Her teeth were yellow and broken, jutting out at odd angles like tombstones in an abandoned cemetery. Then she walked past me toward the rusted Ford in the corner of the yard. But the car was not rusted anymore. It gleamed in the pale light, perfect and new, as if my father had just finished restoring it. She opened the door and climbed inside, leaving dark smears on the leather seats. The baby was no longer in her arms. Give me my son, I screamed. You promised. Give him back. She looked at me through the car window, those white eyes boring into my soul. I promised nothing, she said. You let me in. That is all I needed. The closet door flew open. My mother stood there, her face creased with worry. What are you doing in here? Why are you sleeping in the closet? I looked at the clock on my bedside table. It was past midnight. I had been asleep for hours. What happened at Doña Lucia's house, I asked, still trying to shake off the fog of the nightmare. My mother's expression darkened. Strange things, she said. Very strange things. Many of the women say they will not return tomorrow night. She helped me out of the closet and led me to the kitchen. As she made tea, she told me what had happened. Halfway through the rosary, there had been a sound from beneath the floor, a scraping, dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across dirt. The wooden floorboards had vibrated with it. Everyone stopped praying and stared at each other, waiting for an explanation that did not come. Then the lights had dimmed, not flickered, not gone out, but dimmed, as if something was draining the electricity from the house. The candles guttered and almost died. In the half-darkness, they heard a cough from Doña Lucia's bedroom. Then footsteps, slow and heavy, pacing back and forth behind the closed door. One of the women, the one sitting closest to the kitchen doorway, had screamed and run to join the others. She said she had seen Doña Lucia sitting in the dark kitchen watching them pray. When they went to check, they found nothing but an old radio that had turned itself on, playing music from decades ago. My mother paused, her hands wrapped around her teacup. And when I was walking home, she said slowly, there was someone behind me, following me. I did not look back, but I could hear the footsteps. And from the shadow, from the way they moved, I thought it was Doña Lucia. I went to the window and looked out at the backyard. The rain had stopped. The clouds had parted slightly, allowing a sliver of moonlight to illuminate the yard. The door of my father's car was open. "Mama!" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come here." She came to stand beside me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "There is someone in your father's car," she whispered. I saw her. The massive silhouette sitting in the driver's seat, her white eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. She was not looking at the steering wheel or the dashboard. She was looking at us, at our window, at me. My mother began to tremble. I took her hand and led her away from the window back to the living room. I told her it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, the moon shining through the branches of the trees. I did not believe a word I said, but I needed her to be calm. I needed her to feel safe. I held her until she fell asleep on the couch. At 2 in the morning, I covered her with a blanket and went outside. I had to know. The backyard was silent except for the dripping of water from the leaves. The air smelled of wet earth and something else, something chemical and wrong, like motor oil mixed with decay. I walked slowly toward the car, my bare feet sinking into the muddy grass. The door was still open. I reached out and touched the driver's seat. It was dry, cold, empty. But when I turned back toward the house, I saw a figure standing at the living room window. For one terrible second, I thought it was my mother. But then I realized the figure was too tall, too wide. And the eyes that stared back at me were not brown. They were white. I ran inside. The living room was empty, except for my mother still sleeping on the couch, the blanket pulled up to her chin. I looked at the window. Nothing. No one. But I knew what I had seen. She was inside now. I had invited her in. The following nights blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and dread. Every evening fewer people returned to Doña Lucia's house for the rosary. Every night something new happened. On the third night the noises beneath the floor grew louder. It sounded like an animal digging, like claws scraping against wood and stone. The women prayed faster, their voices rising in pitch and speed as if they could drown out the sound with their devotion. When the candles suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness, one of the elderly women swore she saw someone standing in the corner. A figure, she said, tall as the ceiling, standing perfectly still, watching them with eyes that glowed faintly in the black. It was just nerves, the others told her. Just the darkness playing tricks on an old woman's eyes. On the fourth night, a young girl who had come with her grandmother woke up in the middle of the rosary, screaming. She had fallen asleep in one of the back rooms, and when she opened her eyes, there was a woman standing beside her bed. A very big woman, the girl said between sobs. She was watching me sleep. They searched the room and found nothing. The window was locked from the inside. There was no way anyone could have entered or left. On the fifth night, the scratching beneath the floor became so loud that the prayers stopped completely. The women sat in terrified silence, listening to whatever was below them claw and scrape at the wooden boards. Someone suggested it was a dog that had gotten trapped under the house. Someone else said it must be rats, a whole nest of them. But the space beneath the floor was only 6 inches deep. Nothing larger than a snake could fit down there. On the 6th night, the power went out entirely. The women continued praying by candlelight, their voices barely above whispers. In the kitchen, the old radio turned on by itself, playing a song from the 1940s, the static crackling like fire. And from Doña Lucia's bedroom, they heard footsteps. Back and forth, like someone pacing in circles. Nobody went to check. Each night I sat in the kitchen and watched through the window. Each night I expected to see her emerge from the darkness, and each night when I returned home I felt her presence in the house. A cold spot in the hallway, a shadow that moved in the corner of my eye, the smell of oil and decay drifting through the rooms. She was here now, living with us, waiting for something. 3 nights before the Novenario was supposed to end, my uncle came to visit. Roberto was not really my uncle. He was Elena's uncle, my ex-wife's family. But he had always treated me like a nephew, even after the divorce tore our families apart. He was a kind man, soft-spoken and gentle, and he still checked on me from time to time, making sure I was surviving the aftermath of my shattered life. That evening, he showed up at our front door with a worried look on his face. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "I have had this feeling for days now, like something is wrong with you, like I need to come and check." I told him everything was fine, just tired from the funeral prayers, but he did not seem convinced. He lingered at the door, his eyes scanning the street, the yard, the windows of our house. "I have been passing by," he said quietly, "a few times this week, just driving by to see if everything looked okay. And last night I saw someone in your backyard, a woman sitting in your father's old car." My blood ran cold. "What did she look like?" "Very large," he said. "Very tall." "I thought she was a friend of your mother's, so I did not stop to ask." I wanted to scream at him to tell him what that woman really was. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain something I did not understand myself? I cut the conversation short and watched him walk toward the passageway behind our house, the shortcut that led to the next street. "Buenas noches," I heard him say to someone as he walked. There was someone back there, someone near my father's car. For a moment, I considered running after him, grabbing him, pulling him away from whatever was waiting in the shadows. But fear paralyzed me. I could only stand there listening to his footsteps fade, listening to the low murmur of a voice I did not recognize. Then I heard him laugh, a normal laugh, casual and relaxed. He was talking to one of our neighbors, another man taking the shortcut home. I exhaled. Just a neighbor, nothing more. But the relief did not last. That night my mother had a dream. She told me about it the next morning, sitting at the kitchen table with dark circles under her eyes and a tremor in her hands. "I dreamed of Doña Lucía," she said. "She came to me and told me she could not rest. She said our prayers were hurting her, not helping. She begged us to stop." My mother paused, staring into her coffee cup, as if searching for answers in the dark liquid. I told her to come to our house. I told her we could talk here. She walked with me all the way to the front door, but then she stopped. She said she could not enter, and I said, her voice broke. I said, "Lucia, come in. Do not be shy. Please come inside." We looked at each other across the table. The same terrible understanding dawned in both our eyes. "That was not Doña Lucía in your dream," I said. My mother shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "It was not." She had invited her in too. 2 doors now stood open, 2 invitations had been given. And the thing that had been circling our house, waiting in the shadows, watching through windows, now had permission to stay. The Novenario would end in 3 nights. But I knew with a certainty that settled into my bones like ice that our nightmare was only beginning. That evening I refused to accompany my mother to Doña Lucia's house. I told her I was sick, that I needed to rest. The truth was simpler and more shameful. I was afraid of what I might see in that house, afraid of what might follow me home. I swallowed 2 of my anxiety pills, the strong ones that the doctor had prescribed for my worst nights. They dragged me down into sleep within minutes, a heavy, dreamless black. But somewhere in that darkness I found myself standing in the backyard of the house where Elena and I had lived. The small house behind her parents' property with the leaking roof and the cracked walls, and the nursery we had painted blue. Elena was there. She stood in the garden, smiling at me, her hand resting on the shoulder of a little girl. The girl was maybe 4 years old, with dark hair and Elena's eyes. The daughter we might have had if things had been different. They waved at me, beckoning me to join them. Elena's smile was warm, welcoming. The little girl bounced on her feet with excitement. I wanted to run to them. I wanted to hold them both, to apologize for everything, to tell them I loved them more than life itself. But to reach them, I had to walk through the house, and something was waiting inside. I could feel it. A presence, dark and hungry, crouched in the shadows just beyond the doorway. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to stop, to turn back, to wake up. But Elena kept waving, and the little girl kept smiling, and my feet carried me forward against my will. Then I noticed something. The little girl was shaking her head. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she was telling me no. Her small hand, hidden from Elena's view, pointed toward the house. Then she raised a finger to her lips. "Do not go in." But Elena did not see. She grabbed the girl's arm and began to scold her, asking why she did not want her father to join them. The girl started to cry. I ran forward to stop Elena, to protect my daughter from her anger. The moment I crossed the threshold, something grabbed me from behind. The garden vanished. The light vanished. I was standing in absolute darkness, and someone was breathing on the back of my neck. "I am already inside," the voice said. "You and your mother both invited me. Now I am here to stay." I woke up. The clock said 6 in the morning, but outside my window the sky was still dark. I heard footsteps in the hallway. My mother's familiar shuffle, moving from her bedroom toward the kitchen. She appeared in my doorway and walked to my window. She stood there for a moment looking out at the backyard. Then she turned and walked away toward the living room. Something was wrong. I forced myself out of bed, still groggy from the pills. Through my doorway, I could see into the living room. My mother was standing in the middle of the room, staring at something I could not see. No, not my mother. This figure was too tall, too wide, and when it turned its head slightly, I caught a glimpse of eyes that reflected the dim light like mirrors. White eyes. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. The figure walked slowly toward the kitchen. I heard the back door open and close, then footsteps in the yard, heavy and deliberate. Outside, I heard voices. My mother's voice, cheerful and normal, talking to a neighbor who was taking out her trash. But if my mother was outside, then who had I just seen in the living room? I went to the back window and looked out. The door of my father's car was open again, and for the first time I understood the truth. She was not just visiting. She had moved in. The final night of the Novenario arrived with an unnatural stillness. No wind stirred the trees. No dogs barked in the distance. Even the insects had gone silent, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. My mother insisted on going. She said she owed it to Doña Lucía, that she could not abandon the ritual on its last night. I watched her put on her black dress and her rosary beads, and I wanted to grab her arm to lock the doors to keep her safe inside these walls. But the walls were no longer safe. The thing we feared was already here, walking through our room, sitting in my father's car, watching us from the shadows. I told her I was too sick to go. She did not argue. Perhaps she could see the truth in my eyes, the terror that I could no longer hide. She kissed my forehead and left, and I was alone. The house felt different after dark. The familiar rooms had become foreign territory, spaces where anything could be lurking around any corner. I turned on every light, but they seemed dimmer than usual, as if something was drinking the electricity before it could reach the bulbs. The television played at full volume, voices and music filling the silence, but they sounded distant, muffled, like sounds heard underwater. I sat in the living room with my back against the wall, facing the door that led to the backyard. Through the glass, I could see the outline of my father's Ford, a dark shape against the darker night. The car door was closed now, but I knew she was out there. I could feel her presence like a weight on my chest, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. At 8 o'clock, someone knocked on the front gate. The sound was so ordinary, so mundane, that for a moment I forgot to be afraid. I went to the window and saw 2 girls standing outside, sisters from down the street. They were maybe 10 and 12 years old, holding a stack of raffle tickets for their school fundraiser. I opened the gate just enough to speak with them. "Good evening, is Doña Carmen home?" the older girl asked. "She's not here right now. Come back tomorrow." I was about to close the gate when the younger girl spoke. "We already asked the lady inside. She said Doña Carmen was not home either." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What lady, the big lady?" "She was standing at the window. She shook her head when we asked about your mother." "Which window?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. The girl stepped back, startled by my tone. "In the front or the back inside," the older girl said. She was looking out from the living room window. I turned and looked at the window behind me. Empty. Nothing but the pale glow of the lamps and the flickering television screen. "There is no one inside," I said slowly. "I am here alone." The girls exchanged a glance, the kind of look that children share when adults say something obviously wrong. "She was very big," the younger one insisted. "And very tall. She was watching us the whole time we were knocking. I told them to go home. I did not explain. I did not apologize for my rudeness. I just closed the gate and stood there in the front yard, staring at my own house at the windows that suddenly seemed like eyes staring back at me. She was inside. Not in the backyard, not in the car, not circling the house like a shark around wounded prey. She was inside the walls, standing in the room where I had been sitting moments ago, watching me through the glass while I watched the car. I had to go back in. There was nowhere else to go. The neighbors would think I was insane if I started pounding on their doors, screaming about a giant woman that only children could see. And my mother would return soon. I could not let her walk into that house alone. The front door was still open just as I had left it. The living room looked exactly the same. Television still playing, lights still burning, furniture unmoved. But the air was different now, thicker. It smelled of something chemical and organic at the same time, like motor oil mixed with rotting flowers. "I know you are here," I said aloud. My voice cracked on the words. "What do you want silence?" The television laughed at a joke I did not hear. I walked through the living room, checking behind the couch, behind the curtains, inside the coat closet by the door. Nothing. I moved to the kitchen, opened every cabinet, looked under the table. Empty. The back door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it. I remembered turning the deadbolt, hearing the click, testing the handle to make sure. But now the door stood slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness visible between the frame and the wood. Through the gap I could see the Ford. The driver's side door was open, and she was sitting inside. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw her clearly. Not as a shadow, not as a silhouette, but in full detail, illuminated by the light spilling from the kitchen window. Her face was swollen and gray, the skin stretched tight over bloated flesh. Dark veins crawled across her cheeks and forehead, black lines that pulsed and writhed as if something was moving beneath the surface. Her hair hung in matted clumps, gray and white, and stained with something dark plastered to her skull like wet seaweed. Her mouth was curved into a smile, but it was too wide, stretching from ear to ear, splitting her face into a grotesque mask. Her teeth were yellow and brown, some broken, some missing the rest, jutting out at impossible angles like a mouthful of shattered tombstones. And her eyes, those terrible white eyes, empty of iris or pupil, reflecting the kitchen light like two pale moons. They were fixed on me, unblinking, seeing everything and nothing at the same time. She raised one massive hand and beckoned me forward. Her fingers were thick and bloated, the nails long and cracked and black with filth. They curled and uncurled slowly, patiently, as if she had all the time in the world. I stepped back from the door and grabbed the first thing my hand touched. A kitchen knife, the one my mother used to cut vegetables. It felt absurdly small in my grip, a toy weapon against a monster from a nightmare. "What do you want?" I shouted again. She did not answer. She just kept smiling, kept beckoning, kept watching me with those dead white eyes. The front door opened behind me. I spun around, knife raised, ready to fight. But it was only my mother, her face pale and drawn, her rosary beads clutched in her trembling hands. Behind her stood Doña Teresa and 3 other women from the neighborhood. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Perhaps they had. "Something happened," my mother said. "Something terrible. We need to talk." I lowered the knife and stepped aside to let them in. As they filed past me, I looked back at the car. The door was closed. The driver's seat was empty. But on the leather upholstery, I could see dark smears where she'd been sitting. Stains that had not been there before. They gathered in the living room, perched on the edges of chairs and sofas, as if ready to flee at any moment. My mother sat beside me close enough that our shoulders touched. I could feel her trembling. The house was full tonight, she began. Not just the usual women. Everyone who had stopped coming returned. Their children came. Their husbands came. The living room was packed, and there were people standing in the yard because they could not fit inside. Why, I asked. What brought them back, fear Doña Teresa said. She was sitting across from us, her German shepherd's leash wrapped around her wrist, even though the dog was not with her. She could not stop twisting it over and over like a rosary made of leather. She visited all of them, in their homes, in their dreams. Some of them woke up with bruises like someone had grabbed them in the night. My mother nodded. They said it was Doña Lucía at first. They thought her spirit was restless, that she was angry we had not finished the prayers. But then some of them started to describe what they saw more clearly. And it was not Doña Lucía at all. One of the other women, a heavy-set lady named Doña Marisol, whose daughter had seen the figure in the bedroom days ago, leaned forward. It was a big woman, she said, huge, like a giant. My daughter still cannot sleep. She keeps saying the woman watches her through the window at night. We pulled the curtains closed, but she says she can hear her breathing on the other side of the glass. My mother reached for my hand and squeezed it tight. There is something else, she said. Something I did not tell you before. When your father was dying, when the illness had taken most of his mind, he would talk about strange things. I thought it was the fever, the medication, but now I'm not sure. What did he say? He talked about a night when he went to Doña Lucia's house. He said there was a demon there, a creature that had taken the form of a woman. He said he helped Doña Lucia kill it. The room went silent. The women stared at my mother with wide eyes, their rosary beads frozen in their fingers. I thought he was hallucinating. My mother continued. He was so sick by then he did not recognize me half the time. But he kept repeating it over and over. He said he helped bury it. He said Doña Lucia gave him the car as payment. I felt the world tilt beneath me. The car. My father's Ford, the one he never finished restoring, the one that sat rusting in our backyard for 15 years. Where did he bury it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. He never said. But the car came from Doña Lucia's house. He drove it home the same night everything happened. The same night Soledad disappeared. I did not tell them about the stains on the car seats. I did not tell them about the woman I'd seen sitting in the driver's seat smiling at me through the kitchen window. I just sat there, pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking together in my mind, forming a picture I did not want to see. The next morning I went to find the truth. Doña Lucia had a cousin named Magdalena who ran a small gift shop on the other side of the neighborhood. I had met her once briefly at the end of the Novenario. She was a quiet woman with sad eyes and silver hair, and she had seemed genuinely surprised that the house had been mostly empty that final night. The shop was small and cluttered, filled with ceramic figurines and greeting cards and cheap toys imported from China. Magdalena was arranging a display of glass angels when I walked in. She looked up at the sound of the bell and smiled in recognition. "You are Doña Carmen's son," she said. "I saw you at the rosary. You look exhausted, mijo. Is everything all right?" I did not waste time with pleasantries. I need to know about the house where Doña Lucia lived, about who lived there before her. Her smile faded. She set down the angel she was holding and studied my face for a long moment. "You want to know about Soledad?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Soledad, loneliness, abandonment, a fitting name for a monster? Yes. Magdalena sighed and gestured for me to follow her to the back of the shop where a small table and 2 chairs served as her office. She poured us both cups of coffee from a pot that had been sitting on a warmer for too long, then sat down heavily as if the weight of old memories was pressing on her shoulders. Soledad was Doña Lucia's cousin, she began. Her older cousin. She built that house with her own hands, brick by brick, back when this neighborhood was nothing but dirt roads and empty lots. She lived there alone for many years. never married. Never had children. She was not the kind of woman who wanted those things. Magdalena paused, staring into her coffee cup. She was very tall, nearly 2 meters, and heavy, very heavy. Anyone who saw her once would never forget her. She had a presence, a weight to her that went beyond the physical. When she entered a room, you felt it, like the air became thicker. What happened to her? She disappeared. One night she simply vanished. Doña Lucía said she left, walked away without taking anything, without saying goodbye. But none of us believed that. Soledad loved that house more than anything in the world. She would never have abandoned it willingly. Magdalena looked up at me, her eyes sharp despite her age. We always suspected something happened to her, something terrible. But we could never prove anything, and Doña Lucía was always so kind, so generous, so beloved by everyone. No one wanted to believe she could be capable of hurting anyone. I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" What was Doña Lucía capable of? Magdalena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Soledad was not a good woman. She practiced things, dark things. Not Catholicism, not any religion I recognized. She worshipped something old, something that existed before Christ, before the saints, before any God with a name. The neighbors used to hear voices from her house at night, conversations with someone who was not there. Or perhaps something that was there, something the rest of us could not see. She set down her coffee cup with a trembling hand. When Doña Lucía moved in with her after her husband died, we all thought it was a kindness. Soledad taking in her widowed cousin, giving her a home. But now I wonder if it was something else. If Doña Lucía was meant to be a servant, or a sacrifice. "What do you think happened?" I asked. "I think Doña Lucía fought back. I think whatever power Soledad served, Doña Lucía learned to use it against her, and one night when Soledad was vulnerable, Doña Lucía struck first." Magdalena reached across the table and gripped my wrist with surprising strength. There was a man who helped her that night, a neighbor who heard screaming and came running. He never told anyone what he saw inside that house, but a few days later he had a new car, a Ford that Soledad had been restoring before she disappeared. "My father. Your father," Magdalena confirmed. "I did not know until recently. One of the older women at the Rosary recognized the car when they went to your house. She remembered seeing Soledad drive it years ago. I felt sick. My father, the quiet man who taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with my homework, had helped bury a woman in her own backyard. Had helped kill her, perhaps. And the car I had grown up seeing through my bedroom window, the car that reminded me of him every single day, was sitting on top of her grave. "Is she buried under the car?" I asked. Magdalena did not answer. She did not have to. I walked home in a daze, the morning sun too bright, the sounds of traffic too loud. Everything felt unreal, like I was moving through a dream from which I could not wake. The pieces were all in place now. Soledad had been murdered by Doña Lucía with my father's help. Her body was buried somewhere on the property, most likely beneath the car that had once belonged to her. And Doña Lucía had spent the rest of her life keeping Soledad's spirit trapped, using the same rituals Soledad had once practiced. 9 nights of prayer, 9 nights of the Rosary, not to send Soledad's soul to heaven, but to keep it locked in the house, imprisoned by faith and repetition. But now Doña Lucía was dead. And we had completed the 9 nights of prayer without knowing what we were really doing. We had not been praying for peace. We had been breaking the seal that kept Soledad contained, and I had made it worse. I had invited her in. When I arrived home, my mother was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in front of her. She had not changed out of her nightgown. She had not brushed her hair. She looked like she had aged 10 years in a single night. I told her everything. Magdalena's story, the truth about Soledad, the connection to my father, and the car in our backyard. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. "Your father never told me," she finally said. "All those years he never said a word. I thought the car was just something he bought from a friend." I never imagined. She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. We need to find a way to stop her, I said, to send her back. If prayer trapped her before, maybe prayer can trap her again. My mother shook her head slowly. Doña Lucía did it every year. She kept the seal strong with constant prayer. We cannot do the same. We do not know the ritual. We do not know what words to say or how to say them. Then what do we do? Before she could answer, someone knocked on the front door. It was evening already. The sun was setting behind the houses across the street, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. I had not realized how much time had passed since I returned from Magdalena's shop. I opened the door and found two young girls standing on the porch. The same girls who had come selling raffle tickets the night before. "We came to warn you," the older one said. She was breathless, as if she had been running. "The big lady. We saw her again." "Where?" "She was walking down the street toward your house. She looked angry. Really, really angry." I looked past them down the street. It was empty. No pedestrians, no cars, no one at all. "Go home," I told them. "Lock your doors. Do not come out until morning." They ran. I watched them disappear around the corner, then closed the door and locked it. The deadbolt felt flimsy, useless. What good was a lock against something that could enter through dreams? The lights flickered. It was subtle at first, a barely perceptible dimming that could have been a power fluctuation from the grid. But then it happened again and again, the lights pulsing like a heartbeat, growing weaker with each beat. "She is coming," my mother whispered. She stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her rosary beads clutched in both hands. I can feel her. I could feel it too, a pressure in the air, a thickness that made it hard to breathe. The temperature was dropping, the warmth of the house bleeding away, as if someone had opened a door to the void. The back door rattled. I grabbed the kitchen knife again, the same one I had held the night before. My mother began to pray, her voice low and steady, the words of the Hail Mary falling from her lips like water. The rattling stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then the door burst open. She filled the doorway like a nightmare made flesh. Her massive body blocked out the night behind her, her gray skin glistening with something wet and dark. Her white eyes found me, immediately fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood freeze. "You have been asking questions," she said. Her voice was not sound. It was vibration resonance, a frequency that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to the center of my brain. "You visited the old woman at the shop. You know who I am now." I held up the knife, knowing it was useless, knowing it was nothing more than a gesture of defiance. "I know what Doña Lucía did to you." Soledad laughed. The sound was like bones scraping together, like metal grinding on stone. It filled the room, filled my skull, drove out every thought except terror. "What Doña Lucía did to me," she repeated. "Let me tell you what Doña Lucía did to me." She stepped into the kitchen, her footsteps shaking the floor. My mother's prayers grew louder, faster, more desperate. I took that woman in when she had nothing. Her husband was dead. Her home was gone. She came to me begging, and I opened my door to her. I gave her food. I gave her shelter. I gave her power. Another step. She was so close now that I could smell her, the reek of decay and motor oil and wet earth. The smell of the grave. But she was weak, ungrateful. She learned the rituals I taught her, and she used them against me. One night while I slept, she came into my room with a knife. She cut my throat. She watched me bleed. And when I was too weak to fight, she called your father to help her finish the job. She smiled that terrible, too wide smile that split her face like a wound. They buried me under my own car, the car I was restoring with my own hands. They drove it over my grave and left it there, and then they spent the next 15 years pretending I never existed. My mother had stopped praying. She stood frozen, staring at Soledad with horror in her eyes. 15 years, Soledad continued. 15 years in the dark, in the dirt, with the weight of that car pressing down on me. Do you know what that does to a soul? Do you know what it feels like to be trapped between worlds, unable to live, unable to die, unable to do anything but wait and hate and hunger? She reached out and touched my face. Her fingers were cold and wet, leaving dark smears on my cheek. But now the old woman is dead, and her precious rosary cannot hold me any more. She kept me locked in that house with her prayers, but the house is empty now. The seal is broken. And you sweet boy, you invited me in, you and your mother both. 2 doors opened, 2 anchors set. This house is mine now. I jerked away from her touch. What do you want? What do I want? She tilted her head, considering the question. I want to live again. My master taught me a way. If someone invites me into their body completely without resistance, I can take it. I can wear their flesh like a coat. I can walk in the sun again, eat, drink, feel. Everything that was taken from me, I can have again. Her eyes shifted to my mother. You are old, your body is weak, but it would do for a time. Long enough to find something better. No. I stepped between them, the knife raised. You are not touching her. Soledad's smile widened. Such devotion, such love. It reminds me of how I felt about my house, my car, my life, before they took it all away. She stepped back just slightly. Her white eyes never left mine. I will make you an offer, Miguel. Your mother invited me in her dreams. That invitation is weak, partial, but yours was stronger. You spoke the words while fully aware, even if you did not understand what you were doing. You are the true anchor. If you invite me completely, if you surrender yourself to me, I will leave your mother alone. I will take what I need from you and nothing more. And if I refuse, then I will take her instead. Slowly, painfully. I will make you watch. The lights flickered again, dimmer than before. The darkness outside the broken door seemed to pulse and breathe like a living thing. Do you want to see your son again? Miguel Soledad asked suddenly. Her voice had changed, becoming softer, almost gentle. He is with me, you know, on the other side. I can take you to him. All you have to do is say yes. My heart clenched. The image of my baby flashed through my mind, the child I never held, the son whose face I never saw. You are lying, am I? She reached into the folds of her nightgown and produced something small and pale, a blanket, blue like the walls of the nursery Elena and I had painted together, the blanket we had bought for our son. He cries for you, Soledad whispered. Every night he cries. He wants his father. He does not understand why you never came for him. I felt tears burning in my eyes. Stop. Let me in, Miguel. Let me all the way in, and I will take you to him. You can hold him. You can tell him you love him. All the things you never got to do. Behind me, my mother began to pray again. Her voice was thin and reedy, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Do not listen to her, mijo. She is lying. Your son is with God. He does not need a demon to speak for him. Soledad's face twisted with rage. God, you think God cares about your son. God does not even know he exists. But I do. I know everything about the spaces between life and death. I know where the lost souls go, and I can bring them back if the price is paid. She thrust her hand toward me, the blue blanket dangling from her fingers. Take it. Feel it. This is real, Miguel. This is proof. I have your son. And the only way to get him back is to give me what I want. I reached out. My fingers brushed the fabric, soft and worn, exactly as I remembered it. The blanket we had wrapped around a pillow, practicing for the day when we would wrap it around our baby instead. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside me, a place beyond fear, beyond grief. Beyond the desperate longing to hold my child. You do not have him. You never did. You're just wearing my pain like a mask, using my memories to manipulate me. But I will not let you. I threw the blanket aside and raised the knife. You want me to invite you in, I said. Never. I would rather die. I would rather watch you tear me apart than give you what you want. This is my house. My mother is under my protection, and you are not welcome here. Soledad stared at me for a long moment. Then her face contorted into something inhuman, a mask of pure rage that stretched her features beyond recognition. So be it, she snarled. I will take what I need the hard way. She lunged. I slashed with the knife, felt it connect with something solid, heard her roar of fury. Then her hand closed around my throat and lifted me off the ground. The world went gray at the edges. I could not breathe. Her face filled my vision, those white eyes burning with hatred. "You are just like your father," she hissed. "He thought he could fight me too. He thought he could help that old woman trap me in the ground. But look where he is now, dead, rotten, and you will join him soon." My mother screamed. I heard her footsteps, heard the crash of something breaking. Then Soledad grunted and dropped me. I hit the floor and gasped for air. Through blurred eyes I saw my mother standing behind Soledad, holding the shattered remains of a ceramic vase. Blood, black and thick as oil, oozed from a wound on the back of Soledad's head. But Soledad did not fall. She turned slowly, fixing my mother with a gaze that promised unimaginable suffering. "You should not have done that." She reached for my mother with both hands. "Stop!" The voice came from outside. A woman's voice, old but strong, cutting through the chaos like a beam of light. Soledad froze. I looked toward the broken back door and saw figures gathering in the yard. Doña Teresa was there, rosary beads wrapped around her hands. Beside her stood Doña Marisol, and behind them more women from the neighborhood, a dozen at least, their faces grim with determination. They began to pray. It was not a whisper, not a murmur. It was a chorus, a wall of sound that rose up like a wave and crashed against the darkness. The words of the rosary spoken in unison filled the house with a power I could feel in my bones. Soledad screamed. She pressed her hands against her ears, her body convulsing as if the prayers were physically striking her. "You cannot stop me," she shrieked. "You do not have the power. The old woman is dead. No one knows the ritual." "We do not need a ritual," Doña Teresa replied. She stepped through the doorway, still praying, still advancing. "We have faith. We have numbers. And we have each other." The other women followed her, forming a semicircle around Soledad. Their voices rose louder, stronger, an unstoppable tide of devotion. Soledad fell to her knees. Her skin was bubbling now, blistering as if the prayers were acid eating away at her flesh. She looked at me with those white eyes, and for the first time I saw something other than rage in them. Fear. "This is not over," she gasped. "I am bound to this place. As long as my bones lie in the earth, I cannot leave. You can push me back, but you cannot destroy me. I will wait. I will watch. And when your faith weakens, when your prayers falter, I will return." She turned and ran crashing through the back door, disappearing into the night. The women kept praying, their voices following her like arrows, driving her further and further away. I helped my mother to her feet. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she was alive. We were both alive. "Thank you," I said to Doña Teresa. "How did you know to come?" "We were praying outside," she said, "as we have done every night since this began. And tonight we felt something, a darkness coming closer. We knew we had to be here." She looked toward the open back door, toward the yard where my father's car sat in the moonlight. She said, "Her bones are in the earth." Do you know where I nodded slowly? Under the car. My father helped bury her there years ago. Doña Teresa crossed herself. "Then we must pray," she said. "Every night until we find another way. We must keep her at bay the way Doña Lucía did. It is the only way to protect this house." I looked at the Ford, rusted and decaying, a tomb for a monster that would never rest. "We cannot move the car," I said. "If we disturb her remains, we might make things worse, and we cannot keep this up forever. There has to be another way." But even as I spoke the words, I knew there might not be. Some evils cannot be defeated. They can only be contained, held at bay by constant vigilance and endless prayer. We had won the battle, but the war would never end. 3 years have passed since that night. I'm writing this from the same bedroom where I used to hide in my closet, the same room where I once felt the weight of something monstrous settle onto my bed behind me. The walls are the same faded yellow. The window still looks out onto the backyard, onto the rusted Ford that has not moved an inch since my father parked it there decades ago. Everything looks the same as it did before the nightmare began, but nothing is the same. Nothing will ever be the same again. Doña Lucia's house sits abandoned at the end of the alley, slowly collapsing in on itself, like a body decaying from within. The wooden walls have warped and buckled. The roof has caved in over the living room where we once gathered to pray. Weeds have overtaken the yard, climbing the walls, swallowing the windows, reclaiming the structure for the earth. No one has tried to buy it. No one has tried to tear it down. The property simply exists, rotting in plain sight while the neighbors pretend not to see it. The children in the neighborhood have given it a name. They call it the House of the Rosary Demons. They dare each other to run inside, to touch the walls, to stay for a count of 10 before fleeing back to the safety of the street. Most of them refuse. The ones who accept the dare always come running out with pale faces and wide eyes, swearing they saw something in the shadows. A figure, a woman, watching them from the darkness. Their parents tell them it is just their imagination. Their parents know better than to say what they really believe. My mother survived that night, but the cost was written on her body. She moves more slowly now, her joints aching with a stiffness that no doctor can explain. She tires easily, sleeping 12 or 14 hours a day, as if something drained the vitality from her bones. She never goes outside after sunset anymore. When the sky begins to darken, she locks every door and window, draws every curtain, and sits in the living room with her rosary beads praying until sleep takes her. She does not speak about what happened. Neither do I. The words are too heavy, too dangerous. Speaking them aloud feels like an invitation, a crack in the armor we have built around ourselves. I have tried to build a normal life. I found a job at a warehouse on the other side of the city, loading trucks and stacking pallets until my muscles ache and my mind goes numb. I started dating a woman named Gabriella, a quiet school teacher with kind eyes and a gentle laugh. She knows something terrible happened in my past, but she has never asked for details. Perhaps she senses that the truth would be too much for her to bear. Perhaps she is simply wise enough to let sleeping demons lie. On good days, I can almost forget. I wake up with Gabriella beside me, drink my coffee, go to work, come home, watch television, fall asleep. A routine, a pattern, the kind of life that millions of people live without ever knowing how precious and fragile it truly is. But the good days are never permanent. The darkness always returns. Sometimes late at night I hear footsteps outside my window, heavy and slow, circling the house with patient determination. I lie in bed with my eyes closed, counting the steps, waiting for them to fade. They always do eventually, but they always come back. Sometimes I wake at 3 a.m. with the absolute certainty that someone is standing in the corner of my room. I can feel the weight of their gaze, the pressure of their presence. I keep my eyes shut, my breathing steady, my body frozen beneath the blankets. If I do not acknowledge them, perhaps they will leave. If I do not look, perhaps they will not be real. Sometimes in the corner of my vision I see a shadow that should not be there, a shape too large, too tall, too still. I turn my head and it vanishes, leaving only empty air and the faint smell of motor oil and decay. She is still here. Soledad, she never left. The prayers pushed her back, but they did not destroy her. How could they? Her bones still lie beneath my father's car, anchoring her spirit to this place like a nail driven through flesh. She cannot leave, and we cannot make her go. All we can do is hold the line night after night, year after year, until death finally comes for us all. Doña Teresa leads the prayers now. Every evening as the sun sets, she gathers the faithful in her living room and they recite the rosary together. Not for the dead, but for the living. For my mother and me, for everyone in this neighborhood who has seen the shape in the shadows and lived to tell the tale. I join them when I can. I still do not believe in God, not really, not the way they do. But I believe in the power of their voices raised in unison. I believe in the light that fills the room when they pray. And I believe that as long as we keep fighting, as long as we refuse to surrender, Soledad cannot win. But belief is a fragile thing. It wavers, it weakens, and in the moments when my faith falters, I can feel her waiting. Last night I dreamed of my son. He was standing in the backyard next to the ford just as he appeared in the dream 3 years ago. But he was older now, 4 years old, maybe 5. the age he would have been if he had lived. He had dark hair like mine, and his mother's eyes, and he was looking at me with an expression I could not read. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to scoop him up in my arms and hold him tight and never let go. I wanted to tell him all the things I never got to say, the words that have been trapped in my chest since the day he died. I love you. I am sorry. I would have given anything to watch you grow up, but my feet would not move. I stood frozen on the back porch, separated from my son by a distance that seemed to grow with every heartbeat. He raised his hand and waved at me. A small wave, tentative and shy, the way a child waves at a stranger they are trying to trust. Then the shadow appeared behind him. It rose from the darkness like smoke from a fire, coiling and thickening until it took the shape I knew so well. The massive body, the gray skin, the white eyes that held nothing but hunger. Soledad placed one enormous hand on my son's shoulder. He did not flinch. He did not seem to notice her at all. "He has been waiting for you," she said. "All this time he has been waiting. He does not understand why his father never came to find him. You are not real. None of this is real." Soledad smiled, that terrible smile that split her face like a wound. "What is real, Miguel? The flesh that rots, the bones that crumble, or the spirit that endures trapped between worlds hungry for release?" She stroked my son's hair with her bloated fingers. He leaned into her touch, trusting, innocent. "I could take you to him," she whispered, "right now, tonight. All you have to do is invite me in. Not halfway, not in a dream, completely. Let me wear your flesh and I will carry you across the threshold. You will hold your son again. You will never be separated." I felt the longing rise in my chest, a pain so sharp it stole my breath. 3 years of grief, 3 years of emptiness, 3 years of waking up and remembering that he was gone. The weight of it pressed down on me like a physical force, crushing my resistance, drowning my will. One word. That was all it would take. One word and the pain would end. No. The word came from somewhere deeper than thought, deeper than emotion. It came from the part of me that had watched my mother fall to the ground, the part that had felt Soledad's fingers around my throat, the part that knew the true cost of surrender. "You do not have my son. You never did. He is beyond your reach in a place you cannot touch. And I will not sell my soul for a lie." Soledad's smile vanished. Her face twisted into a mask of fury, the skin stretching and tearing, revealing something dark and writhing beneath. "You cannot resist forever," she hissed. "Your faith is weak, your prayers are hollow. One day you will falter, one day you will break, and I will be there waiting." She reached toward me with both hands, her fingers lengthening into claws, her mouth opening wide enough to swallow the world. I woke up screaming. The clock on my nightstand read 3:17 in the morning. The room was dark, silent, empty. Gabriella was not beside me. She had gone home to her own apartment hours ago, leaving me alone in the house where my mother slept down the hall. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my heartbeat to slow. Then I heard the whisper. It came from the corner of the room, from the shadows where the light of the street lamp could not reach. A voice like dry leaves scraping against stone. "Let me in, Miguel. Let me in and your son will be free." I closed my eyes and began to pray. The words felt clumsy on my tongue, half-remembered fragments of the rosary mixed with desperate pleas of my own invention. I did not know if anyone was listening. I did not know if my prayers had any power at all. But as I spoke, the whisper faded. The pressure in the room lifted. The shadows retreated to their proper places. When I opened my eyes, the corner was empty. But I could have sworn I heard laughter, faint and mocking, drifting in from somewhere outside. If you are reading this, I need you to understand something. I am not writing this story to entertain you. I am not writing it to scare you or to thrill you or to make you check the locks on your doors before you go to sleep. I am writing it because you need to know the truth. There are things in this world that should not exist. Things that hide in the spaces between life and death, waiting for an invitation. They cannot enter without permission. They cannot cross the threshold unless you open the door. But we open doors every day without realizing it. We speak words without understanding their power. We invite strangers into our homes, into our dreams, into our hearts. And some of those strangers are not human. So here is my warning, the only gift I can offer to those who come after me. Never invite anyone into your home after the sun goes down. Not a friend, not a neighbor, not the familiar voice of someone you love calling to you from outside your window. You do not know who is really speaking. You do not know what is wearing their face. And if you have already extended an invitation, if you have spoken the words in a moment of weakness or a dream you cannot remember, then pray. Pray every night. Pray until your knees ache and your voice gives out. Pray like your soul depends on it. Because it does. Some doors once opened can never be fully closed. Some guests once invited will never leave. I still live in the house where I grew up. I still sleep in the room where Soledad once lay beside me, her rotting breath hot on the back of my neck. I could move. I could run. I could put 1,000 miles between myself and the Ford that sits rusting over her grave. But it would not matter. She is bound to me now, not just to this place. The invitation I gave her created a connection that distance cannot sever. Wherever I go, she will follow. Whatever life I build, she will shadow. The only choice I have is to stand my ground and keep fighting. So I pray. Every night without fail I kneel beside my bed and speak the words that hold the darkness at bay. I do not know if God is listening. I do not know if my prayers reach any higher than the ceiling of my room, but I know they have power. I know they keep her away, at least for a little while, and that is enough. It has to be enough, because there is something worse than death, a fate that would make your soul envy non-existence. And Soledad is still out there waiting for the night when my prayers finally fail. Some nights when the wind dies down and the neighborhood falls silent, I stand at my bedroom window and look out at the backyard. The Ford sits there in the moonlight, a monument to secrets and sins. Its windows are dark, its doors are closed. But sometimes, just before I turn away, I see movement in the driver's seat. A shape massive and still watching me through the glass. And sometimes I hear a voice carried on the wind like a whisper from the grave. "Let me in, Miguel, let me in." I close the curtains. I say my prayers. I try to sleep. But I know she is out there. I know she will never stop. And one day when I am old and tired and my faith has worn thin, she will find the crack in my armor. She will slip through the gap in my defenses. She will take what she's been waiting for all these years. Until then, I will keep fighting. I will keep praying. I will keep telling this story to anyone who will listen. Because if something happens to me, if you never hear from me again, you will know why. And you will know to be afraid, not of the dark, not of death, but of the voice that calls to you in the night, the shape that watches from the shadows, the invitation you might give without ever realizing what you have done. There is something worse than death, a fate that would make your soul envy non-existence. And Soledad is still waiting, right outside your window, right now. Have you ever invited something into your home without knowing what it really was? A stranger at your door, a voice in your dreams. Tell me your story, share your warning, because the more we speak about these things, the stronger we become. And if you hear footsteps circling your house tonight, if you feel the weight of eyes upon you in the dark, do not answer. Do not speak. Do not open the door. Just pray and hope that someone is listening.